Hello everybody, this is Gregory with How I Lost Over 100 Pounds and have kept it off for 30 plus years, where there should be no hesitance in your weight loss and in your weight maintenance. Today we're going to talk about some steps you can do post binging. Now, before we begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. Also check out my website, which has hundreds of articles and recipes that might be useful to you. My books you can find on Amazon. If you like podcasts, I have The Awakened Man and The Cinema Rag. You can find on Apple and Spotify. And lastly, if you appreciate my content, there is a link for PayPal. Now, look, binging. A lot of people that are overweight have a disordered relationship with food, and there's different types of disordered relationships with food. I think on different sides of the oscillating pendulum, you're going to find people with anorexia nervosa who have a problem not eating enough. And then on the other side, you're going to have people that have binge eating disorder or bulimia nervosa or anything where they're eating a lot. And so you might have a day where you just binge a lot. You just eat a lot of food. Or it could just be like a post-Christmas day, a day where you're just eating a lot because it's a holiday and you're just using it as an excuse to binge eat. And I've talked about that kind of like a cynical view of Thanksgiving and Christmas. These are these days where it's just like the national binge day. Like it's totally fine to be gluttonous. But either way, like what can you do? And some of these things are very obvious things. And then some of them, of course, are going to be the more deeply kind of psychological thing regarding these things. But if you've binged, let's say you just ate really poorly and you wake up the next day and you feel psychologically crappy, like you feel a little shamed and you feel awful for what you did. And also you just feel physically awful. What can you do? And look, you can kind of relate to alcoholics. There's alcoholics that do benders, right? They just drink for 6 days straight. I have an episode of The Awakened Man, the podcast, probably, you got to scroll down maybe 100 episodes back, where I interview an alcoholic who is kind of the bender type. And it's the same thing. So what can you do when you wake up the next morning? Well, the obvious thing is don't binge again. I mean, that's the obvious one, right? But easier said than done, especially if you have a history of disordered relationship with food, you have disordered eating, and especially if you connect emotions to eating. So if like I'm sad or I'm stressed in my marriage, or my kids are stressing me out, or work is stressing me out, or I'm sad, I'm depressed, food's going to help me. And look, food is like a drug, right? The first couple of bites is going to help you. It might soothe something underlying, but ultimately it just leads to more problems. Just like with cutters, right? The first cut is the deepest, like Sheryl Crow's song, but the first cuts distract them from the deeper pain. And so it's the same thing. The first of anything, the first drink is always great, but obviously don't binge the next day. But what can you do? I would recommend you fast that day, prolong a fast. As you guys know, I fast daily, but you should be fasting. I would recommend fasting, of course, but prolong your fast longer, because part of fasting is that it does eat your fat reserves. But I would do that. I would probably just sort of naturally eat better the next day, maybe do a juice fast, or just maybe eat food that isn't as inflammatory. Typically with binge eating food, it's either high in sugar or high in trans fats, like fried foods, because those taste good, right? So maybe the next day eat something that's kind of bland, maybe like a yogurt bowl or a smoothie or a juice, or something that is bland but still nutrient dense, because you do need your daily calories. So I would recommend something just kind of like a yogurt bowl or a juice, or something like a soup, a bone broth, something that is still nutrient dense, but just not full of all those inflammatory foods. Maybe eat some guacamole, for example. Guacamole is great. It's a superfood. Maybe a little dark chocolate. So eat better. Of course, workout. Maybe do a longer workout. That would make sense. Try to, if you have a dry sauna, to sweat some of those toxins out. But look, all these things, you can take extra walks, do a longer workout to compensate. But the biggest thing is up here, right? Because weight loss, weight maintenance, binge eating, starvation, these are all psychological issues. So the key is not to put yourself in a situation, again, where you're tempted to binge eat. I have an early episode here where I talk about steps you can do, like when you really feel it coming, right? You got to order the DoorDash, or you got to run to the grocery store and you're in the grocery line waiting, or you're in the drive-thru and you're upset because there's 5 cars in front of you at Taco Bell or Jack in the Box, wherever you're going. When you're in that kind of mode, and again, some of you can relate to this, some of you can't. what are some steps you can do? And the obvious one is to kind of step back and be like, this isn't going to help you. Just drive away, drive away, drive away. I talked about in the past how when I was really having bad binging, I just wouldn't even take my wallet with me. I would just take my driver's license, and I wouldn't even take my wallet. So, I mean, there are steps that you can do, but ultimately it's all psychological. So what do you do the day after a binge? Don't hate yourself, because that's just going to kick in the shame cycle. Don't hate yourself. Just understand, like, I had a bad day. Like with any kind of type of addiction to something, the new day, like Annie says, tomorrow is a new day. The sun will come out and you just start afresh, because every journey has a day one. And so, yeah, you might have had a bad day and you say, look, I had a bad day. And then you got to just do the deep work. So when you have another stressful time or a sad time, you're not going to go to the food, because you've learned over and over that the food doesn't work long-term to soothe you, and you're getting fatter and you're getting more unhealthy. So you kind of have to step back and do this like intellectual honesty and just be like, why am I doing this if this actually in fact doesn't help me on any level? So again, it's all the intellectual work, the deep work. And ultimately, it's like burrowing to the center of the earth. You got to get to the childhood trauma that caused you to have the disordered relationship with food in the first place. But in the meanwhile, you got to do journaling or whatever it is. Talk to yourself to be like, look, this isn't working. Me binge eating doesn't help. Because ultimately, yeah, the day after binge eating, you can work out more and all the things I've told you, which are obvious. But ultimately, you're going to keep doing it, right? You're going to keep doing it unless you do the deep work. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Hit the notification, subscribe, and share button. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.